What's up, Make Pop Music? It's Austin here from Make Pop Music and Austin Hall Audio, and today I'm going to show you 5 vocal production techniques to get your songs from sounding like this
to lose it, 'cause she got no brake lights. Wants to party up in LA. I'm never keeping up with this pace. I'm nothing
to something like this.
Lose it, 'cause she got no brake lights. Wants to party up in LA. I'm never keeping up with this pace. I'm nothing.
What's up, everybody? It's Austin here from Make Pop Music and Austin Hall Audio, and we are back with another tutorial. And for this week, I wanted to do something that you guys ask a lot in the comments or on our group, and that is different vocal production techniques to really get your vocals kind of highlighted in a song. So we're not going to be focusing on how to get a good vocal mix today. We've done that in videos in the past, and I'm sure we'll do more videos on that in the future. But today, we're going to focus on if you already have one vocal and it's mixed pretty well, but it's still just not having the emphasis that you need in the song. I'm going to show you 5 of my favorite different tips and techniques to kind of improve your vocal production, improve your vocal arrangement, and really get those vocals sitting big and huge on a nice pop record that you probably have kind of going on in your mind. If you have any questions about any of the techniques or the tips that we do in this video, let us know in the comments down below and I will try to answer as many of those as possible. And if you want to listen to this song that we're using for the demo today is actually out. It's called Brake Lights by Jade and Luke, so there will be a link in the description below where you can just go listen to that in its entirety if you want. I did produce the song, mixed it, mastered it, and everything. It's been out for a little while, so if you want to check it out, definitely go support the artist. I'm sure they would appreciate it. Other than that, let's go ahead and hop in and see 5 of these techniques. But before we do that, if you do like this video, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe because that will help out our channel a ton. And if you want to see more of our content, head over to makepopmusic.com where you can check out all of our other free and paid content over there. And then other than that, let us know what videos you want to see in the description below. But without too much talking, let's actually hop in and take a look at these 5 techniques. All right, let's dive into the song. I'm going to show you what it sounds like with just the one lead vocal because that's kind of the starting point for any song. So we'll start with one lead vocal and then I'll kind of show you the different 5 tips that we're going to talk about. So here's the section that we're going to kind of focus on today.
No brake lights, wants to party up in LA. I'm never keeping up with this pace. I'm nothing like you, but it's true. What you do is what I like about you, yeah. No, 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 no.
So as you can hear, production sounds great. Vocal mix actually sounds really, really good. Vocal performance was solid, but it's just lacking a little bit of energy. So let's go ahead and talk about the first thing I like to focus on when I am really trying to dial in vocal production and a vocal arrangement, and that is getting the right kind of actual arrangement at hand. So a lot of the tips we'll talk about you can do with whatever vocal you have, whether that's one vocal, a couple vocals, but for this tip right here, this is actually going to happen in the tracking and engineering phase. So let's go ahead and talk about what we can do to thicken these up. So we have the one lead vocal right here. It's got its vocal chain.
Brake lights, wants to party up in LA.
So the first thing that I want to do is I want to go ahead and get a lower vocal. So he's saying this just 1 octave lower. So we've got something like this, and it's basically just the same vocal chain copied. I just drug down the volume just a little bit.
Brake lights, wants to party up in LA. I'm never keeping up with this pace.
So adding an extra take of the unison but 1 octave down can really help thicken that out. I'll kind of show you what that sounds like in the mix. So now we have these 2 vocals going.
No brake lights, wants to party up in LA. I'm never keeping up with this pace. I'm nothing like you, but it's true what you do.
So feel free to add something like that. And then what we're also going to do is, we've talked about this on the channel before, we're going to add extra takes of that lead melody, but we're going to add it for the left and for the right side. So what I do is I have the vocalist sing the same exact thing, but it's a totally different recording. So you can see right here, this is comp 1, comp 2, comp 3. Comp 3 is spread all the way to the right. Comp 2 is spread all the way to the left. Basically just the same vocal chain. I just adjust some of the sends to make sure it doesn't wash out. But let's go ahead and take a listen to what these sound like without the lead.
Brake lights, wants to party up in LA. I'm never.
And then when we throw this on.
Brake lights, wants to party up in LA. I'm never.
And then when we throw that low vocal on.
Brake lights, wants to party up in LA. I'm never.
And now when we throw that into the mix, you'll hear a pretty big difference, especially in terms of just overall volume and width.
No brake lights, wants to party up in LA. I'm never keeping up with this pace. I'm nothing like you, but it's true. What you do is what I like.
So adding things like that, we're going to call those unison. So unison is basically the same melody, either the same octave, an octave lower, or an octave higher. They're not really adding any extra harmonic content. What they're doing is they're just adding a little bit of width and depth. And then you do the same thing for harmonies. So if you guys want a video to kind of show you how I go through and highlight keywords and phrases to show the artist where we need to stack these things, let me know, because I can do a full video on that. But for all intents and purposes of this video, I just want to show you what a difference kind of adding some of these different vocal arrangement layers would sound like. So we have 2 takes of a harmony.
Brake lights,
Pretty much the same exact chain as well. We're just only panning these 79% left and right instead of 100. So now we've got those layered on.
brake lights, watch the party up in LA, I'm never keeping up.
And then we've got a second harmony right here. So we've got harmony 2A and 2B. So these are going to be 90% left and right. Then we have a couple extra that come in on keywords and phrases. We've got this right here. And that layered up with all of these sounds like this. And then we've got even more. And then when we add that with the extra kind of unison vocals, it's going to sound a little bit something like this. Let's show you in the mix so you can actually really hear how big of a difference this makes.
Watch the party up in LA, I'm never keeping up with this pace, I'm nothing like you, but it's true.
And then you can even go a step further and you can start adding things like ad-libs. This is all going to fall into the typical kind of vocal arrangement that you're going to sit down and talk about with your artist, or you're going to write out yourself. But these are things that need to be decided before it gets to the mixing phase.
Watch the party up in LA, I'm never keeping up with this pace, I'm nothing like you, but it's true. What you do is what I like about you, yeah.
And you can instantly hear with all of those extra kind of stacks, those harmonies and those ad-libs, doing a full vocal arrangement rather than just having the artist sing the vocal one time can be absolutely detrimental to getting the vocal sound that you're going for. Because if you're looking for that big polished pop sound, it's just not going to normally happen with one vocal, especially in a pretty dense chorus like this. Let's go ahead and let's talk about tip number 2, and that is actually adding artificial harmonies. So this is something that I like doing, especially in songs that lean a little bit more towards kind of hip-hop instrumentation. So like this has the 808s, this has the kind of hip-hop driven drums, and what we're going to do is we basically just duplicate that lead vocal, and it's going to sound a little bit something like this.
Watch the party up in LA,
and you can even see this is high comp 1. This is the same exact vocal. So literally all I did was duplicate it. And then the first thing that I like to do is throw on something like doubler, because we're going to want to spread this sound out.
Watch the party up in LA,
and I'm just using the 4 voices. I am going to leave the direct sound in there because we're going to tune it down. But if you weren't, you could easily just take that out.
Watch the party up in LA.
And then I'm going to go ahead and let's go to auto-tune, which is what I have first in my chain. And I'm just going to drag it down an octave. You could do this with pretty much any pitch correction software. You could even drag it down in Cubase. I like using auto-tune because it'll always kind of adjust the format as well, which is just going to give me a little bit smoother, like less artifact driven tone. So here's what we have with that. And one thing to keep in mind is, since you're tuning it down an octave, you're going to have to probably EQ this a little bit differently, and you're going to have to de-ess this differently than you did that original lead, because all of those S's are now falling in a completely different range. So I found typically on a vocal, I start to see issues with S's around like 5 to 7K and like 10 to 12K. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically compensate for that going down an octave. So we're going to look for sibilance errors kind of in the like 2 to 3K area, and then in the like 5 to 7K area. So I'm just going to de-ess that pretty hard, so we're not getting any of those, because I really don't need them from this. And then the last thing I'll do is I'll hit it with some EQ. I'm just going to use the Cubase stock EQ for this. You could easily use something like Pro Q and filter it out, but this ended up actually just doing exactly what I needed. And what that is gonna do is just kind of get it out of the way of those lead vocals so it's not so bright, because this is really just a textural thing. So when I add this with all of these other vocals, you can hear that it's tucked in really, really low, but especially in areas where all of this vocal production won't happen, like some of these verses back here, it can be a really, really cool piece of like vocal ear candy that if the artist doesn't send you that many stems, you can do something like this and easily kind of supplement the production.
Bright lights, watch the party up in LA. I'm never keeping up with this pace.
And then let's go look at it somewhere like back here, for instance.
Brake lights, she drives double the limit, but she don't mind. Got hundreds of tickets.
It's just a really cool thing that you can do, and it's one of those things that's easy to do no matter what stage of the production process you're in. You could also do the same thing where you pitch it up an octave, but again, just kind of look out for some of those EQ and DS issues when you start changing the actual kind of harmonic content by pitching it up or down. All right, let's go ahead and let's talk about tip number 3 that you could do to kind of improve your vocal production, and that is getting a little bit more creative with delays and reverbs. I typically find that people will just kind of set up their delay and their reverb sends and just kind of automate those throughout the song. So I guess the first part of this tip would be using different reverb and delay sends. So I've talked about it on the channel before, but here's kind of what I do typically. I like something like a really, really short reverb that's just going to be like a room or a really short plate. And what that's going to do is that's just going to give a little bit of width to that vocal. So we're not going to be really looking for that tail or like that signature kind of vocal reverb that you're thinking of, but it just helps put this in a little bit better space.
I'm nothing like you, but it's true. What you do is what I like about you, yeah.
Just kind of gives it a little bit more space in the mix. And then what I'll do too is I'll add something like a long reverb. So it depends on what I'm doing for the song, but sometimes I'll use Pro R, sometimes I'll use Verb Suite, sometimes I'll use Vintage Verb. For this, I literally just put on Pro R with the stock settings and it did exactly what I wanted.
Lights, watch the party up in LA. I'm never keeping up with this pace.
So that's going to give it a little bit of its space, and then what I do is I kind of do the same thing with delays, where I'll have a stereo Vox delay, which is going to be the longer delay. So this is going to use repeater, and I'm using a quarter note, and I actually have it spread stereo, so it's not ping-ponging. It is hitting both sides at the same time, but it's not coming down the middle, which I find kind of creates a tighter vocal coming right down the middle of the mix. So here's what that sounds like.
Lights, watch the party up in LA. I'm never keeping up with this pace.
And it just puts it in a nice little area. And then what I'll do is I'll have something like a slapback delay. Again, giving me just a little bit of width and just honestly like smushing the vocal into the mix a little bit without going nuts with compression. And I just used this vocal slap delay preset that was in H delay. And here's what that sounds like.
Lights, watch the party up in LA. I'm never.
So doing things like that, like stacking different delays and reverbs, can give you a cool space, but I find sometimes that's still not what we need in the mix. So like, let's take a look at an area where I do some of these extra little vocal delay and reverb little tricks. So here's the first area where we're gonna do a delay throw.
Tomorrow comes.
So what I did is, there's a couple ways that you can do this. I'm just duplicating the lead vocal right now, and you can either put on a delay at like 100% wet so it will not happen at the same time. What I did for this is I literally just physically dragged it back. So you'll see right here, let me get these vocals going.
Cause she lives like no tomorrow comes.
But I can still process that as a delay throw. So what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and put on something like repeater. But since I'm dragging it back, I don't need it to be 100% wet. So I just have another little quarter note delay.
Cause like no tomorrow comes. And
then what I'm gonna do is basically drown this in reverb.
Like no tomorrow comes.
And then what I wanted to do for this one was I wanted to give it a little bit of extra sauce that wasn't happening in a lot of those delay sends. So I ended up bit crushing it, and then I just mix that bit crusher down a little bit, and you get something like this.
Like no tomorrow comes.
And then I just filtered it out, so we make sure that we don't have too much of that top end and low end that's going to happen, especially when we bit crush it. We kind of just band pass everything to sound like this.
Like no tomorrow comes.
And doing this little trick where you're not doing it on a send, you're actually just manually placing these delays where you want, can be a really good way for you to add extra effects. It can be a really good way for you to really control the timing of how they come in and how they exit. And it's just a really nice way to make sure that you have these extra little pops everywhere, because other than that, like the main quarter note delay, the main long reverb, those kind of continue through the whole song. So if you have areas where you can do these extra special little ones, we've got something right here that's just kind of like a supplemental delay on the end of phrases. And then when we put on the repeater and the Pro R, we get something like this.
Lights, never works a day, just late nights, waking up the city and me.
And those are pretty simple, but that's just that's a kind of example on how you can do it on 100% wet. And then it just gives you a little bit more flexibility over like automating something like the actual sends that you already have set up. And then you can even do the same thing with reverb. So I'm going to consider this like the same tip. But what I did was I literally just duplicated that lead vocal one more time.
Lights, never works a day, just...
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw on a little bit of H delay. I used a different delay just so it would kind of give me a little bit different texture for this.
Lights, never works a day, just late nights.
And we're going to have that pretty aggressive, because what we're going to do with this reverb is we're going to have it 100% wet. And the key is, if you're going to basically layer something that you've duplicated over itself, you're going to want some kind of effect on 100% wet to change it enough so you're not going to have phase issues. Because if we only have this reverb at 50% wet and that delay at 50% wet, we're still going to get some of that dry signal that is literally just duplicated, and it's going to start to cause some wonky issues. But what we can do is we can throw on a reverb like this, and we can really kind of spread the sound out.
Waking up the city at midnight, I always fall for this amusement.
So it's the same vocal and the same vocal chain all the way up to this delay and this reverb, but since we have a bit of delay and then that reverb is 100% wet, we can tuck that in without there being phase issues, but it kind of gives us a nice little bit of space. So here's what that sounds like with the artificial low vocal and then all of the vocal stacks.
She got no brake lights, never works a day, just late nights, waking up the city at midnight.
So it just adds a little bit. I almost just use this as like a pad that I can pop under everything for width and for texture, and just to kind of get the mix not feeling so dry and not feeling so kind of disconnected. So you can use it however you want. A lot of the time what I'll do is I'll just end up using a layer like that in a chorus just to give me a little bit more depth and space. Let's go ahead and talk about tip number 4, and that is using a vocoder to kind of add some of your own different textural elements and some of your own harmonic elements. So what we're going to do is, again, I've just duplicated that vocal so we can see how many different tips we can do by using that vocal, just by using effects at 100% wet to add a little bit of sauce. So we have the vocoder right here.
'Cause she got no brake lights, never works.
So it's that vocal duplicated, but there is no vocal chain anywhere on this. And I'm going to use Auto-Tune Vocodist. It's what I've been using recently at the moment. I was actually using a different vocoder on this for the actual mix and the release. But since I've been using this one a lot lately and people wanted to see how to actually set this up, I figured why not, kill two birds with one stone. So that's what we're going to do. So I have Vocodist right here. It sounds like nothing right now, because what I've done is I've selected the pick track to be MIDI. So the first thing that you want to do with a vocoder is set up some MIDI. So right now, I'm just literally taking these big extended chords that we have. It's not doing any, like specific things. It's just these big kind of pad elements. And then what you need to do, especially in Cubase, is you're just going to go to the MIDI out and you're going to send that to the vocoder MIDI in. So now we've got this MIDI triggering this vocal.
Lights, never works a day, just late nights, waking up the city at midnight.
And then once you do that, I'll kind of show you how I like to kind of set my sounds. So Vocodist is really cool because it's got auto-tune built in, so I can save a little bit of CPU and not have to tune the vocal going into vocoder to make sure we don't get any wobble. But we've got it on A minor, which is the key that I have. We're compressing the sound a little bit going into vocoder, which is going to give me just a little bit tighter signal, and it's going to make sure that we can just really compress it. I don't want a lot of dynamics in this whatsoever. And then what I also do is I put a little bit of chorus on this and then spread this out. So when you turn on Vocodist, it's going to sound a little bit something like this.
Today, just late nights, waking up the city at midnight. I always fall for it, this amusement.
And doing something like that can get it out of the way where it's not going to kind of cause issues with my main vocal, but it's going to give me a cool little bit of texture. Then you can always just flip through these. There's a bunch of different kind of filters. Every vocoder will operate differently. You can even sidechain your own sounds in. However, for this, I just needed something pretty typical. And then I just adjusted the 2 oscillators that they have set up. It's really easy right here with this XY control. So they basically have it operating as it goes from like a saw all the way to a square. And then somewhere in the middle is like a couple different pulse width modulation squares. So I'm just gonna set it right here in the middle. It sounded cool in the mix when I was working on it. And then you can really just go through and adjust this however you want for your song. There's gonna be a million different ways to do that. But the cool thing about this is no matter what we do, I can change any of these notes. Let's pitch it up a little bit.
Bright lights, never works a day, just late nights, waking up the city at midnight.
I could even go in and I could write melodies on the keys. So if I wanted to play it more like a talk box, all I would have to do is just play a little melody, route it through that, and then I could even route a sound. But adding something like a vocoder is a really nice way for me to add width and texture, especially if the artist doesn't supply these. So Jaden was good enough to kind of follow the vocal sheet that I sent over. But when we tuck that vocoder in, it gives us even a little bit more width and texture.
Bright lights, never works a day, just late nights, waking up the city at midnight.
So let's go to this area that we showed you first, and I'll kind of show you what everything's sounding like now that we have all these different elements before we get to our last tip.
She got no brake lights, wants to party up in LA. I'm never keeping up with this pace. I'm nothing like you, but it's true. What you do is what I like about you, yeah. Na, 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 na.
All right, so tip 4, add that vocoder. Let's move on to tip 5, and that's gonna do add some wide kind of crushed vocals, especially if you need a little bit more saturation. So we're pretty good right here for all of these, but when we get to these nods, it's still kind of getting lost in this dense mix a little bit. So what we're gonna do is once again, duplicate that first vocal, and I've got the vocal chain right here. What I'm gonna do though is I'm gonna filter out a little bit of highs and lows because as we start saturating it and stuff like that, I wanna make sure that we're not gonna be saturating too much top end or too much bottom end. And then let's go ahead and let's just use a Vox Punch by Antares. This is gonna be some pretty aggressive compression.
Cause she got no brake lights.
And it's gonna add those cool little punchy transients, which ends up sounding really cool when we add all of this extra kind of compression with the saturation, because as you saturate things, they'll just naturally compress themselves and we'll start to lose a little bit of that and it might get smushed. So we'll add something like that to kind of counteract that. Let's go ahead and add Duo so we can spread this vocal out. This is what's gonna help us not have phase issues.
Cause she got no brake lights.
And then let's go ahead and add that saturation. Let's go ahead and add a little bit of de-esser just to make sure that we're not killing ourselves. I'm gonna filter out that low end because as you add saturation, low end tends to get pretty gnarly. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna add repeater. So we have a quarter note. This is actually doing a ping pong to give us a little bit of different spatial awareness than we've currently had in this mix. And then we're gonna add something like Pro R with a totally different reverb setting to give this its own space. So now we've got this vocal, which is the same exact vocal as the lead, just processed with all of those extra things, basically from here down.
Cause she got no brake lights.
And it's pretty aggressive. You can kind of use that in the mix as you want, but doing something like that, like saturating the vocals, spreading them out, and then just kind of filtering them and tucking them in can give you a really, really nice bit of punch and width without you having to go in and add a million different vocal layers. So now that we have that, let's take a listen to this kind of post-hook kind of drop that we have in the song.
Cause she got no brake lights. Cause she got no brake lights.
And that pretty much does it for the 5 tips that we're gonna talk about. So one more time, I'll show you a preview of what it sounded like before we had any of that. So here's what it sounds like with just the lead vocal.
Brake lights, watch the party up in LA. I'm never keeping up with this pace. Nothing like you, but it's true. What you do is what I like about you, yeah. Na 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 na, 'cause she.
And if you follow along to all the steps in this video, you can take something like that and turn it into something like this.
Watch the party up in LA. I'm never keeping up with this pace. I'm nothing like you, but it's true. What you do is what I like about you, yeah. Na 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 na, 'cause she got no break lights. Na 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 na.
Hopefully this helped. And there we have it. There are 5 different vocal techniques and vocal production tips that you can use to help take your vocals from being a little bit boring and a little bit stale to being these huge, wide, thick, kind of all-encompassing vocals that you'll hear on top of a pop arrangement. So hopefully this video will give you some ideas of things that you can do to kind of spice up your vocal production and your vocal mixes. But if you have any questions, please let us know in the comments down below. Again, if you do like the song and want to hear it, there will be a link in the description. And if you want to check out more of our stuff to help support the channel, you can head over to makepopmusic.com and check out all of our free and paid content over there. But if you like this video, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. That helps us out a ton, helps us reach more people so we can help more people. And then let us know what videos you want to see in the comments down below. But that's going to do it for this video. We will be back next week with another one. Much love, everybody. Stay safe. Peace.